It's going to take 3. So this is part 2. And it seems like a strange, title, because in Revelation 1:8, it says, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. So this apostasy is named by God. And the only reason that I can think maybe it was named that is because the Omega is a continuation of the Alpha. And, Jesus is the same one that's the Alpha as the Omega. So it makes sense that there's a connection between the two. And I believe we've made a mistake in general, thinking that the only thing that made up the Alpha was pantheism. And so, of course, we don't see very much problem with pantheism today. I'm sure there's some of it going on, and probably even some Adventists are involved with pantheism. But there's a lot more to it, and that's what I'm going to spend most of the time on tonight, is what can we learn from the Alpha that will help us to identify the Omega. There were 3 key statements that Ellen White made, and I'm just picking the sentences tonight. In First Selected Messages 203, Ellen White said, I knew that the Omega would follow. And here's another aspect that's been left out, most people's thinking. Of course, today, I would say the average Adventist doesn't have a clue about Alpha and Omega. But when I came to Wildwood, it was something that was fairly thought about and studied about. In a little while. In other words, the Omega would begin shortly after the Alpha. In a little while. And I trembled for our people. There's mainly one reason why the prophet would tremble. And that is because she would expect that people would stay away from the Omega, but instead they were getting taken in by the Omega, and she trembled for what was going to happen to the church. The second one is page 200, same book. The Omega will follow and will be received by those who are not willing to heed the warning God has given. So here it narrows it down a little bit to those that are not willing to pay attention to the warning that was given through her, that they will get engulfed in the Omega of apostasy or heresy. And the third one, the Omega will be of a most startling nature. Now, if you think about that, in the Alpha, the people that were tripped up by the Alpha, it wasn't startling to them at all. In fact, they argued that they were in the right, so they weren't startled. So how can it be of a startling nature? It's not only a startling nature to the people that are aware of what it is, and they can't believe that so many people are falling for all these things. And it also would be of a startling nature for those that all of a sudden wake up and they realize, oh, I was fooled by the Omega of apostasy. So we can learn quite a bit from those 3 sentences in regard to both the Alpha and especially the Omega. Here we find something that was reported by letter by Willie White. That was Ellen White's son that helped him after her husband died to, carry on her work. A letter by W.C. White to Far Eastern Division, May 1915, and printed in Asiatic Division News of May 1 to 15, 1915. Here's what she said. Great things shall come to pass after I am gone. Satan will work as never before. All that can be shaken will be shaken out. We must draw near to God, for we cannot lean upon man or the crowd. As Adventists, we have many weaknesses, but one of them is that we follow great men. And that problem has existed at Wildwood. I don't know that it does now. At least I'm not aware of it. But when Elder Frizzy was here, quite a few people would say, if Elder Frizzy said it, don't question it, because it has to be right. Well, we're warned not to do that, because all that can be shaken will be shaken out. Instead of drawing near to men, we need to draw near to God, for we cannot lean upon man or the crowd. In other words, we can't. What's that? Exactly. He did not promote that at all. But that's what people have a tendency to do with people that are really successful and talented people, and he certainly was. Here's the primary cause of why is it that so many people fell for the Alpha. I mentioned the last time that this was discussed in a either general conference meeting or something like Autumn Council or whatever. The Alpha was discussed, and the only reason it was defeated was one vote. So that many ministers couldn't tell that the Alpha should be shunned. Well, here's the bottom line reason. I am receiving instruction regarding the dependence that is to be placed in God. We are to depend far more on Him and far less on men, who, if they had opportunity and were left to themselves, would lead the flock of God into strange pastures. Satanic agencies are linking arms with men who should stand free from all seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Deceptive theories have been arrested in their development, but they have not been rooted up. That's a very key point. Because the prophet was told to meet it, and she was faithful to meet that apostasy, it arrested it, but it did not rip up all of the things that made it. It says deceptive theories have been arrested in their development, but they have not been rooted up. So guess what? I've learned from gardening, if you don't get the roots, it comes up again. Hearts are not changed. So here's the real cause. Hearts are not changed. They knew Ellen White was a prophet. They knew that if she said it had to be right, although some even would argue with her. There are men who are blinded by Satan's sophistry. They are not converted. So the bottom line problem is lack of conversion. That's the primary cause of the alpha, and it will be the primary cause of the omega, which I don't believe is too much of it in the future. I think we're on the tail end of it. So, and if you study the Laodicean message, you will see that the main problem with Laodicea is lack of conversion. When there's a lack of conversion, then people don't have the judgment that they need to have to face what Satan is able to do. And we're told that in 1 Corinthians 2, verse 14. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. So an unconverted person is totally incapable of recognizing the efforts of Satan to trip them up. And if they don't hatch it up themselves, they will fall for theories that other people are presenting, and they think it's okay and it's something good because, as it says, the natural man in the unconverted state looks at what God says is foolishness. Now, here's the good news. In the Bible and the spirit of prophecy is all the information needed to never get involved with the alpha, to never get involved with the omega. But if the person's unconverted, that advice looks like foolishness to them. And so they are hindered from being able to recognize. And also it says, he can't understand the truth because it's spiritually discerned. So this is the problem, and that problem has existed ever since around 1855 and 6. Also in Ephesians 4:14 it says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. So Satan has his instruments to, try to deceive God's people. We are target number one. God's people are number one target for the devil, because most of the rest he's already got, and if he can just get us, then he's really happy. So I believe this text is talking about the omega. When the omega is well developed, every wind of doctrine will be blowing, and there will be people presenting these things who seem very believable, and so we are carried about by these winds and here and there and everywhere, instead of staying right on the path that God has for us. Now, I meant to mention this with the previous slide. If you stop to think about it, you'll understand why not having the prophet alive is a far more dangerous time. Because when Ellen White was alive, you could preach a sermon or you could promote a certain theory, and she just might come and point out that you were dead wrong. But because Seventh-day Adventists don't read the Spirit of Prophecy very much, now people can preach all kinds of things and other people fall for it. So it's a far more dangerous period of time than when the prophet was alive. So here's some of the results that I found. In First Selected Messages 48, the very last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. Why? Because the Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Proverbs 29:18. Satan will work ingeniously in different ways and through different agencies to unsettle the confidence of God's remnant people in the true testimony. Now, if you get the words that are in there, you'll know she's talking about her own writings. So she is pointing out that here is a terrible deception that's going to come upon Seventh-day Adventists, and it's a part of the Omega apostasy. In fact, it's another one of the roots, I believe, because of one of the statements I'll read here in a minute. You'll see that why I say that. First Selected Messages 48, there will be a hatred kindled against the testimonies, which is satanic. So Satan is going to get into the hearts of people to criticize and run down what Ellen White says. The workings of Satan will be to unsettle the faith of the churches in them. Is that going to be the Protestant churches? No. Seventh-day Adventist churches. The workings of Satan will be to unsettle the faith of the churches in them. For this reason, Satan cannot have so clear a track to bring in his deceptions and bind up souls in his delusions if the warnings and reproofs and counsels of the Spirit of God are heeded. Now, she's not negating the Bible at all by saying this. But what she is saying is that God saw that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was going to face things so dangerous that they needed, on top of the Bible, they needed to have her writings. Now, she does say, but people twist it, I believe, the wrong way. She says, if you had studied your Bible, you wouldn't need my writings. But they misunderstand, because one time I saw this paper, it was entitled, He That Said, Said Also. And they are taking one aspect and neglecting this one that we're reading here tonight. And we didn't do it from the Bible, and God knew we wouldn't do it from the Bible, so he gave us all the help that we need to be able to recognize everything that Satan was going to do. And also, page 41, same book, soon. I thought it's interesting. She says, in a little while, the Omega will come. Here she says, soon. Every possible effort will be made to discount and pervert the truth of the testimonies of God's Spirit. Now, this one's worth thinking about. Seventh-day Adventists love discounts. If they get a 50% discount, they'll probably buy some things they don't need. If they get a 70% discount, for sure they will buy some things they don't need. When it comes to the spirit of prophecy, I've lived in this church all 81 years of my life, and I testify that our confidence, this isn't true of every single person, but in general, our confidence in the spirit of prophecy is from 50 to 70% discounted. And so this is one of the main reasons why we're not helped in the battle against the Omega. The word pervert is also a very interesting statement. because people quote the spirit of prophecy and twist it to say something it wasn't intended to say. Now, when Ellen White was alive, she could say, "That's not what I said." But now she's not here to defend her true meaning of it. And so it happens a lot more frequently. I was talking to someone today, I believe it was today, on the telephone. And they're all wrapped up in this deception that the Adventist church is in apostasy because of what is said on our number 2 belief about the Godhead. And of course, I agree that it's a poor choice to have the word Trinity in there. I wish I started looking back in other church manuals, and it's fairly recent that the word Trinity was put in there. So we used to say Godhead. And so to that distance, I can agree with them that was a poor choice. But after it says Trinity, it makes it plain there are 3 persons in the Godhead. And so the one God is talking about the unity rather than how many there are. But this guy just can't get it. He just hammers, there's only one God. Well, he quotes spirit of prophecy, but he doesn't look at all the evidence. If you look at all the evidence, it's clear there's not one person that we can call God. There's 3. This one's a very interesting one, too, from the 1888 Materials, 194. And I've read all 4 books of the 1888 Materials. If you ever have time to do it, you'll really learn a lot about that movement. And that was a mini experience of what would happen in a more major way at the end of time. I tell you, the work God has given me to do has not suffered and is not likely to suffer half as much from open opposers as from my apparent friends. There's this Pastor Radcliffe that left the Adventist church and has taken it upon himself to just tell everything he possibly can think of against Ellen White. We don't need to worry about people like that. Yes, they'll trip up some people, I'm sure. But the ones that we need to worry about are the ones that claim to be the believers in the spirit of prophecy, but they don't believe it all. And that's what made the Alpha. Notice what it says next. Here, I took this now from Series B, number 7, page 56. He, meaning Kellogg, has allowed others to gain the impression that his course has constantly been justified by the witness of the light given him through the testimonies. Ellen White, all through Kellogg's life, was busy giving him advice. And for years, he accepted that advice, and it was a blessing. But the time came, he stopped taking that advice. But he let people keep on thinking that he was in harmony with what Ellen White said. Now, in the 1888, one of the persons she's talking about is Uriah Smith. And in fact, she warned him in those materials, you're going to do so much damage with what you say about my writings that you'll never be able to correct it all. You're doing a lot of damage. And for about 3 or 4 years, he was undermining Ellen White's writings, but all the time saying, I believe in Ellen White's writings. So we're not going to be free of those kind of people in our day. We're going to have to make sure we know that what they said is a correct interpretation of it. And by the way, you can check me out. I guarantee you, if you find that I'm wrong at any point, I will change it. Result number 2. He, that is Kellogg, is doing all in his power to create a division between the medical work and the ministry of the Word. Now, he didn't start out that way. He started out trying to get the pastors interested in healthful living and in medical missionary work. But in general, they just didn't respond. And he got discouraged with that. And during his time of apostasy, which this is talking about that time, he was trying to get separated. He wanted to get all the medical missionaries separated from the pastors. So this sheds some light on this reference that Wildwood uses a lot, Medical Ministry 241. I want to tell you that when the gospel ministers and the medical missionary workers are not united, there is placed on our churches the worst evil that can be placed there. Would you agree that the omega is the worst thing that could happen to us? And here it says the worst evil that could happen to us comes because of the pastors and the medical missionaries not being united. Now let me just explain what it seems to me this is saying to us. When the pastors do not practice healthful living, they become confused in regard to Bible truth, and they're not able to preach a clear, straight message. And when the physicians do not get developed strongly in a spiritual line, they prescribe things that are not good for people and do a lot of other damage as well. And so the worst evil is only cured when either we work very closely together so that pastors learn what the medical missionary knows and the medical missionary learns what the pastor knows. That's the only way that we can really avoid the worst evil that would come upon our church. Series B, number 7, page 63. I write this because any moment my life may be ended. So she realized I'm coming down the whole stretch of my life, and I must make sure that the church knows the important things. Unless there is a breaking away from the influence that Satan has prepared and a reviving of the testimonies that God has given, souls will perish in their delusion. So she saw already what was happening to her writings, even before she died. And she said, unless there is a breaking away from the influence that Satan has prepared and a reviving of the testimonies that God has given, souls will perish in their delusion. They will accept fallacy after fallacy and will thus keep up a disunion that will always exist until those who have been deceived take their stand on the right platform. So some of those are the ones that are going to get startled. That, oh, how could we have been mixed up so much? It's because they weren't really searching the testimonies. You know, most of the time Ellen White does not call her writings the spirit of prophecy. That's one that we have done in more later times. In earlier times, her writings were called the Testimonies. And actually, I like that label better because the Bible says that her writings are the testimony of Jesus. So, if her writings are the testimony of Jesus, then why not call them the Testimonies? It's not just talking about that 9-volume set. It's talking about everything she wrote. Then it goes on. They will accept fallacy after fallacy and will thus keep up a disunion. Oh yeah, I finished that, didn't I? Until those who have been deceived take their stand on the right platform. Right after it says that, it says this. All this higher education that is being planned will be extinguished, for it is spurious. Now, specifically, she's talking about Battle Creek College because Kellogg was corrupting the college. And if you read much about this time, you'll see that she warns people even, don't send your children to Battle Creek. And over and over again, she warned them, don't send your children. But what I don't think is recognized is that the same problems that developed, maybe not the exact same, but many of the same problems that existed in Battle Creek under the Alpha would also exist in institutions of higher learning in the time of the Omega. So this has a double meaning, which is often true. Then it touches on what kind of education should really be given. The more simple the education of our workers, the less connection they have with men whom God is not leading, the more will be accomplished. You know, I've often pondered what would happen if Jesus came to the universities of today and he didn't look like the pictures, so they didn't know it was Jesus, and he applied for the job as a professor. Would he be accepted? No, he wouldn't, because he wouldn't have the qualifications. But interestingly enough, he was the greatest educator of all time. He had 12 students, and they turned the world upside down in 30 years. So the more simple the education of our workers, the less connection they have with men whom God is not leading, the more will be accomplished. But I don't believe we have seen that as a church. Work will be done in the simplicity of true godliness. And the old times will be back when, under the Holy Spirit's guidance, thousands were converted in a day. When the truth in its simplicity is lived in every place, then God will work through his angels as he worked on the day of Pentecost, and hearts will be changed so decidedly that there will be a manifestation of the influence of genuine truth as is represented in the descent of the Holy Spirit. Now, I know pastors who were very effective in their work, who were discharged because they wouldn't go and get an advanced degree. And I know others that made application to be a pastor who were well able to do the work. They would not be accepted because they didn't have the degree. So, something has slipped in this area, and I believe that's warning us. But because people can read the context and say, oh, that was talking about the Battle Creek School, then they don't pay attention to the message that's given there. Here's another one that's specifically mentioned in Series B, number 7. The sanctification that they claim is polluted by the most seductive sin. So here they were claiming a high level of sanctification, but the truth was that they were polluted by the most seductive sin, which in their estimation is righteousness. This corrupting spiritualistic view, see, it's not just pantheism that's spiritualistic. This corrupting spiritualistic view of matters is blinding the spiritual eyesight. Men may flatter themselves that there is seen the working of the Spirit of God in the company assembled at Battle Creek. So it has to do with the subject of righteousness by faith as well. I was in charge of an institution that was hit with 2 of these kind of ideas. And one of them was that if you are converted, you won't sin. And so, the answer to anybody that sinned was, well, you're not converted. And pretty soon, I became the enemy on campus because I didn't believe that. Well, in God's providence, He took me away from there. And when I went back after a few years, I found the whole thing was a mess. Some people had given up trying to live the Christian life because they came to the conclusion, I'm not converted, so, what's the point? And other people were like, apparently the ones here, they were saying, I don't sin. I'm converted. I don't sin. Well, there have been books written about this, and they have circulated widely. I know several institutions that were, for a while, they were tottering as a result of this philosophy. So this is not something that Satan's done with by any means. Series B, number 7, page 5 and 6. Satan has been putting his evil sentiments to be worked out in scientific problems. He has blinded the spiritual eyesight, and deceptive, delusive imaginings are taking the place of the word of life and truth. So it's not just Ellen White's writings, it's the Bible. That when Satan gets his foot in the door and people start listening to what he's saying and they don't recognize it's against the Bible or spirit of prophecy or both, that's when trouble comes. Some in exalted positions of responsibility are sustaining error in the place of truth. So, that's talking about leaders, right? So leaders are involved in this. Satan will continue to bring in his erroneous theories and to claim that his sentiments are true. Seducing spirits are at work. one thing will follow another in spiritual sophistry to deceive, if possible, the very elect. Now, when that phrase is used, we're talking about the Omega, because that's when that text is talking about. So the people that live in the last days, the Adventists that live in the last days, are going to face this even wider and stronger, and it's going to involve even leadership. Sometimes we have gotten the idea, I think this is the major idea, that every error has been kicked out of the church. And we don't have any of them inside the church. They're all kicked out. If you want to know, I'm not the only one that can see that it's not all kicked out. Listen to some of Ted Wilson's sermons recently. I've listened to about 5 of them. And boy, I'm thankful for his courage. He's laying it out about a lot of issues. In one talk, he told all the workers in the worldwide church, he said, if you don't stop doing that and believing that, you ought to resign. Well, we know they're not going to resign. They're going to try to infiltrate. They're going to try to get more on their side and try to overpower not only Ted Wilson, but all the rest. That's what's going to be worked by Satan. He doesn't give up easy. So one thing will follow another in spiritual sophistry to deceive, if possible, the very elect. Okay, now here's some more specific things. Series B, number 7, page 11 and 12. Are they showing the greed, the selfishness, the sinfulness of sharp practices? In the past, this was done in our institutions in Battle Creek, and it placed them where the rebuke of God fell on their unrighteousness. Now, what is the unrighteousness we're talking about? High prices, greed on the part of those who manage business. His judgments came upon the 2 largest of our institutions, and that was when the Review and Herald burned and the Battle Creek Sanitarium burned. That's what that's talking about. Some seem determined to continue doing those things that brought the expression of the displeasure of God upon those who would not heed admonition and warnings. Notice, it got checked to a certain degree by the burning of those 2 buildings, but it didn't get stopped. The same greed, the same selfishness and sharp dealing with people, it kept on going. They have kept up a continual warfare against the testimonies of reproof that he has sent. So those that were doing that were fighting against the spirit of prophecy. But they weren't always sounding like they hated the spirit of prophecy, but they were attacking it by saying, well, it doesn't really mean that. And, this is not really condemning what we're doing. And that's the way Satan works. He doesn't work out in the open. The time is drawing nigh when the judgments of God will be more signally seen in Battle Creek. And if you want to know the details of what happened, you can read that in Lewis Walton's book on the Omega. And he goes into detail of what happened in Battle Creek, which was the headquarters of Seventh-day Adventists, and what she predicts will happen if they don't change. When that happened, out of 4,000 Adventists that met in the church in Battle Creek, there was only 400 people to meet. And the enemies of Adventists said, yeah, we knew that the Adventist faith was not a good faith, because look at what happened to them. God's displeasure is being manifested on them. And when I read his book, I came away with the definite impression, he didn't say it in so many words, but that when you look at why it happened to Battle Creek, this could happen to many what we might call Jerusalem centers of Adventism. Now, there were a few more references, but I figured I probably should save that till next time. If I have time, I'll go through one or more. But the conditions leading to the Omega are the same conditions that led to the Alpha. Number one is the lack of conversion. Why we can call ourselves the Laodicean church, which means that generally speaking, we're not converted. Why we can do that and not think there's any error in our midst. That's a strange deception when you stop to think about it. Number two, after the death of the prophet, we were far more vulnerable. Number three, a continued failure to follow the spirit of prophecy will increase. This is going to increase after her death. The failure to follow the spirit of prophecy. Number four, the lack of unity between pastors and medical missionaries. I one time was sharing in a group of pastors that I had started a health nugget at the 11 o'clock hour. And I thought, maybe some of the other pastors would like to do that. They went into shock. What? You put health in the divine hour? And I thought, I guess they're not ready to hear that. But, there is, in many ways, a failure to see the value of putting the two together. And we've got to be careful. We don't divorce them here as well, but they really need to be together. Number five, the Omega can make its way when education becomes corrupted. Number six, false ideas of sanctification develop. And when that develops, it allows the Omega to develop more. When Bible truth is misunderstood, it does the same thing. And I would guess that this is probably one of the hardest things to overcome. Greed and sharp practices in the Word. Everything we do practically is overcharged. We charge too much when people get sick. We charge too much even for our books. We charge too much in all kinds of places, so that in one place Ellen White had to say, if Jesus were to come today, he would throw out the money changers, just like he did when he was here the first time. So this is really something that should help us to see the Omega is not something that's going to fall upon the Adventist church in the future. But this is something that fell on the Adventist church long ago and has been gaining momentum, gaining strength, and is moving toward its completion, which the only people that will escape it are the elect, because nobody else will notice. They will think they're doing good. Kellogg kept arguing that what he was doing was good, and they will keep on arguing that what they're doing is good. Well, we got a few more minutes, so let me just share whatever else I can so that next time I can finish. Series B, number 7, page 13. You, that is, those who have dishonored their profession of being an Adventist, you have been going on and on for years against light, against knowledge, until the Laodicean message applies to your case. So a failure to listen to the counsels, both in the Bible and in the writings of Ellen White, lead to the Laodicean condition. Many have become corrupted in faith, corrupted in principle. At first, they felt some compunction of conscience. So when they started down the path, they realized, no, this isn't right. I shouldn't be doing this. But they weren't willing to give up. And they kept going until they thought it was a good path. At first, they felt some compunction of conscience, but they refused to turn back. And now, hardness of heart is preparing them for hopeless apostasy and the judgments of God. There was, I believe, a judgment that fell on us. I learned it from a friend. I don't dare say what it is. But I believe that that was a judgment. It was a shock as to what happened. It says that this hardness of heart is preparing people for hopeless apostasy. What would it be? The Omega. And after God says enough, then the judgments of God fall. The time is near when the deceptive powers of satanic agencies will be fully developed. On one side is Christ, who has been given all power in heaven and earth. On the other side is Satan, continually exercising his power to allure, to deceive with strong spiritualistic sophistries, to remove God out of the places that he should occupy in the minds of men. So she says the time is near, and she presents it that the satanic agencies will be fully developed. Satan is striving, this is a continuation, continually to bring in fanciful suppositions in regard to the sanctuary. Have you noticed the silence of the sanctuary message for many years? I can still remember some of the sermons I preached long, long ago on the investigative judgment. And it was like they never heard that before. Degrading the wonderful representations of God and the ministry of Christ for our salvation into something that suits the carnal mind. So when we hurt the sanctuary message, we do a lot of damage. She's describing some of the things that happen. He removes its presiding power from the hearts of believers and supplies its place with fantastic theories invented to make void the truths of the atonement and destroy our confidence in the doctrines which we have held sacred since the third angel's message was first given. So there again we see that what Satan is driving at is to undermine the foundational doctrines of the Adventist Church. And even pastors in training are told today that our doctrines were all established by scholarship. But this is not true. The teachers that are telling them that may think it's true, but it is not true. Our doctrines were established by prayerful Bible study, with earnest Bible study, more than most of us give to Bible study. So they were very diligent in their study, but at times they had to be helped by God revealing to Ellen White what the answer was. And so our doctrines have been established by diligent Bible study and revelation. I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to figure that out. Why would Adventist scholars be better than the Baptist scholars or any other denomination? The reason that we are more accurate is that we had the help of revelation to establish our doctrines. So anything where our doctrines that were established that way are undermined or damaged or left silent, that is a great mistake, and it will lead to big trouble in the Omega. Yeah, that was the end. So next time we'll get a little more specific, and I don't know if you're really interested in this subject. The book that I found that has the clearest vision on this is one by Julius Gilbert White. The rest of them, and I have at least half a dozen books on the Omega, they get a piece here and a piece there, and they see some of it, but they don't really see the whole picture. And so, Julius Gilbert White. I think he names it Omega, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But probably if you looked up the author, you would find somewhere the book that he wrote. And he tells a lot of other history about what happened in the Adventist Church. That's quite an eye-opener as well. As the Omega was developing, he traced that. So may God help us to be among those that are not tripped up. Probably most of us have been tripped up, some in the past, which means we've got to overcome that and get out of that deception and get on the exact right path so that we are not bothered by future dimensions of this apostasy. And it's not just one heresy. It's a whole group of things that get packaged together by Satan to try to keep even the elect from being ready to meet him. We don't want to be in that group. I know nobody here wants to be in the deceived group in the end of time. So let's pray.
What was that name? I punched in Julius White and it comes up something else. There was the middle name. What?
Gilbert.
Gilbert?
Yes, Julius Gilbert White. Okay. All right, good. So that's the name of the title, Alpha and Omega Apostasy. By the way, John Tyndall, the one that, trained Elder Frazee, he wrote about that as well. And so there's quite a few people through the years that have seen part of it, but I think at this point we can see it all.